If something should happen to you, what would happen to your farm? If the security and protection of your family and the passing of the farm to your loved ones is your dream, then you need a well-thought-out farm estate plan.
I'm Brad Swenson, president of Swenson Investments in Commodities in Sioux Falls and Huron. We're a family-owned company that helps farmers keep the family farm.
During our Farm Basics time today, we'll talk a little about corn hybrid maturity. And if you're a non-farmer, you're probably saying, how do farmers pick their corn hybrids? What are they looking for? Look, the first thing they've got to have is something that fits the maturity range that they need. In other words, something that they can plant at a normal time and harvest at a normal time, and it's ready to go. If it's not the right maturity, it might be ready weeks early and they give up some yield, or it might not be ready at all and then they give up everything. So they've got to have the right maturity. So what does that mean exactly?
Well, weather conditions change every year, but corn hybrids are pretty consistent, and here's how we figure this out. With all the corn hybrids that farmers plant, it takes about the same amount of time for them to emerge from the soil and get to about a 3-leaf corn plant. But when they get to that 3-leaf corn plant, there are some corn hybrids that really kick things into gear and say, wow, fall is coming quick. I need to get ready for maturity fast, so they hurry up and try and produce corn. And then there's other corns that just kind of take their time. They figure, oh, we've got a long season, and it takes a long time for them to get ready. And that's what Brian's talking about with maturity differences. All corns, when you plant them, they're gonna pop out of the ground, depending on when you're doing it, in a week or two, and they'll start growing about the same. But then some corn hybrids really speed up, and others take a little longer to develop.
So basically, with corn maturity, that means how many days does it take to go from the seed in the ground to the corn ear in the fall that is ready for harvest. And you can look at that a couple of different ways. With a lot of the corn companies out there, they will say it's a 90-day corn or it's a 100-day corn, and it's going to take you approximately that many good days to reach maturity. The other way to look at it is what they call growing degree days. And with growing degree days, that's a little bit more of an exact type figure, where it's a number of heat units that it takes to go from the seed to the ear of corn mature in the fall. So let's talk about corn and that growing degree day. What exactly is a growing degree day?
Well, a growing degree day is a measure of the heat that you accumulated that day, and you take the high temperature all the way up to 86 degrees. If it gets higher than that, just figure 86 is kind of a max. And you take the low temperature of the day down as low as 50. So if you had a 45-degree day, you just call it 50. If you had a 70-degree day, you'd call it 70. Well, you add the high temperature and the low temperature, divide by 2, and then subtract 50. And that's how many growing degree units you accumulated that day.
So if, let's say, the high temp was 70, the low temp was 50, you add the two together, that's 120. Divide by 2 is 60, subtract 50, you've got 10 growing degree days.
On our farm, the weather last year was pretty cool. It was a little cooler than normal, so hybrids took longer to mature. So as a result,
we didn't have as much heat.
And as a result, many farmers said, I'm going to have to plant earlier corns for 2010 because we just don't get enough heat anymore for that hybrid to mature. Well, of course, you know what happened in 2010. We got a lot more heat than normal, and all of a sudden, wow, those early corns, they got ready really early in the fall.
Okay, and the thing is, farmers want to try to plant the longest day corn. So in other words, if they have the choice between a 90-day corn and a 100-day corn, they always want to plant the 100-day corn if they can, because typically the longer it takes to mature, the more it yields, just because it has more time to accumulate dry matter in that plant. So you want to plant the later day corn, but the problem is if it doesn't hit maturity in the fall, then the farmer has to spend all kinds of money drying that corn down, and the grain quality isn't as good, and he spent a lot of money to get that done.
Or taking more risk, leaving that corn out in the field longer, hoping that nature will do its job and dry that corn down for the farmer.
Yep, so we're left with this question now of, well, last year we had a cold year, everybody switched to earlier maturities, now we have a hot year. What's going to happen going into this next year?
Well, I can tell you, next year will be different. We know that. It won't be exactly like this year. It won't be exactly like the year before. It'll be something else.
So here's what we always advise farmers to do. Spread the risk. In other words, plant some early numbers, plant some late numbers. On our farm, we had as early as 83-day corn, as late as about 102-day corn. And that's maybe more than what the average farmer will do, but I don't care. That's what we like to do. The other thing is we don't like to plant all of one variety on our farm, or even just 2 or 3. We like to have about 10 or 15 different varieties on our farm. So Some year you're going to have one that's going to be a complete dog, it's going to be a disaster. But if I've only got that on 5 or 10% of my acres, you average it out, we still turn out okay. So spread the risk. That's our #1 piece of advice always to farmers.
So while farmers are picking corn maturities, they try to pick some later maturing things, some early maturing things. So on average, everything on their farm works out and they make enough corn to farm another year. Well, another thing they're trying to do every year is control all the weeds out there, weeds like our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?